Well, hello people, this is Chris aka Sonic72 and welcome back to delivering Creepypasta stories. Now today I'm in Creepypasta stories, we're going to be looking at a lost episode Creepypasta called Eddy and Eddy, Lost Episode. So let's begin. As you may know, the popular show Eddy and Eddy has been running for a long time. However, between October 7, 2003 and October 21st, 2003, episode 34 was accidentally released 1 week before it was scheduled to. It was also known to some around the office the primary writer had been sick with the flu, and instead of going to make episode 34, the show was supposed to replay episode 1 at 5 a.m. Eastern. People reported a very disturbing new episode premiere on Cartoon Network. Some children were uncomfortable enough to see it. Apparently, the quality episode was mediocre when held to regular standards. Animation was choppy, sound was constricted and very muffled. Reports of a line running up and down similar to a crappy VHS tape was received. Scenery was described as overwhelmingly dark and depressing without changing props and other background objects stormy looking. Characters also behaving oddly, instead of the normal goofy hijinks-inspired personalities. Viewers complained they seemed extremely agitated, gratuitously hateful toward each other, and consistently about to begin sobbing after the lines. The protagonist also had a very bad lisp. No one knows why, but he spoke with a sexual tone and that bothered the viewers. I was one of these viewers. The episode began with Eddy walking down the street with Ed. I noted that Ed was missing. There was an angular shot coming in front of the two and to show them walking toward the viewer. He, Eddy, was wearing an angry look. He does that when something goes wrong. His eyes were red around his iris. Ed looked absolutely forlorn and practically dragged behind Eddy, tears in his eyes, which were both lazy and looking in opposite outward directions. Kevin, the series antagonist, was riding his bike opposite of the Eds. Toward them, the shot became blurry and low moans were heard coming from Eddy before Kevin hit him, whichever happened because the screen went to black. The screen then snapped back and Kevin was heading toward Eddy. The view was so blurry this time, all I saw was a green blob headed toward a yellow one. Again, the low moan. Only this time, it sounded like a microphone was broken and loud static came, greatly overshadowing the moan. A claymation sequence of Double D sleeping in Eddy's bed came up. Honestly, it may have just been the abruptness, but I jumped and shivered. Waking up and getting out of bed, he moved oddly around the circular room, the fast pitter-patter of footsteps being the only audio. The steps were very clear as I was shown a bird's eye view of him scampering around the room. There was no visible doors. Ed began screeching, sounding like a fisher cat, as he moved widely around the cell of a room faster and faster until the screen began to blurring again, the purple room's color swallowing a now orange blur. Extreme close-up of Eddy's front door sat, in absolute silence and maddeningly long time, at least 2 minutes of dead silence and the door. Next we see Jimmy and Sarah at the doctor of some sort, probably oral. Jimmy, obstructing the view by hanging lamp, is crying loudly with Sarah trying to comfort him as in an unusual warm fashion. "It hurts, Sarah! It hurts!" Suddenly the door of the room and smashed open by a new character, a dentist. His face wasn't shown because he was tall enough to be out of the shot. Sarah was escorted out of the room. Jimmy was shown. His headgear was mangled, the front bent upward, stretching his lip very high, tearing proportions. The front of his gums was trickling blood, and teeth were missing. The disturbing part was that he lost both his arms and legs beforehand, apparently, and sat a paraplegic. I almost cried as I came to the conclusion the others had beaten him up and bent his handgear. The camera stayed on his mangled face for a few seconds, still as a picture, silent as ever. Commercials came on. We were instantly assaulted with a very hairy Rolf in a darkened shed fisting the cow repeatedly. The visual loops and gets blurry again as the scene pans out. Naz is reading a magazine on her couch. The quality is now perfect. Eddy is now alone without Ed. The quality declines worse than before and he is still walking. The sun now lightening the mood somewhat as he smiles and begins running. The door is shown again we see through Eddy's eyes as he reaches it out and opens it. His house is nice and bright, but a very badly played violin is blaring, the only audio in this scene as he makes his way through the house. Eddy opens the door to his room. Johnny is shown under Naz's couch cushion as he crawls out on all fours in a comedic way and pops out behind her, still oblivious. I laughed because someone forgot to draw his eye, and I thought of a mole. Suddenly, I stopped laughing as he started swallowing her head. Still a cartoonist fashion, of course, but this was different. He and she stayed like this until she started kicking and struggling. Johnny held her like this until she went limp. A zoom in on his face revealed extremely small human eyes. Double D was laying on Eddy's floor, no longer in claymation. The camera showed Eddy's house from a remainder of the episode, about 3 minutes, and the next program began on the spot. Well, all I can say is that this creepypasta isn't as bad as most people say it to be. I mean, it has those bad moments in the creepypasta where it just goes like, oh yeah, it's so cliche. But other than that, some of the stuff that this creepypasta showed wasn't actually that bad. Like, with the bad quality, it kind of makes me actually believe that this is a lost episode, because normally what people try to do with these lost episodes is saying that, oh yeah, they're in good quality, but what this episode tried to do was that it had poor quality, so it seemed like a lost episode. But only the cliche thing I could think of was the Jimmy scene, because of course, like every creepypasta has to have now, it has to have some kind of blood or graphical scene, which this creepypasta, I would have said, I could say actually kind of benefited from this graphical scene, because it kind of just added to the sense that this episode was really meant to be a lost episode, and that something was horribly wrong with this episode. But other than that, I really hope that instead of just leaving at the end, instead of just leaving the final shot to be, I think it was with Naz and Jimmy, instead of just leaving that to be the final shot, why not have like another thing with like one of the Eds staring, all three of the Eds staring into the screen with like a eerie music in the background. But either way, it's not a bad creepypasta, but it's just that there were so many missed opportunities in this pasta that could have made this creepypasta even more the better and scarier. So guys, if you like what you see here, like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you want. I will see you guys next episode. Peace out, peoples, and bye-bye.